The ID card, a simple piece of plastic bearing a man's name and face, hit the polished marble floor with a sharp, insulting clatter. The sound, small as it was, echoed in the vast, cathedral-like lobby of Sterling Financial Bank, a space designed to inspire awe and reverence for the god of money. Every head in the room turned. The quiet murmur of high finance conversation ceased. The silent, deferential ballet of tellers and clients froze. Anderson Mitchell, senior manager of client acquisitions and a man who wore his ambition like a second skin, had literally thrown the document on the floor as if it were a piece of trash. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice a smooth, condescending purr that did nothing to mask the contempt in his eyes. He adjusted his perfectly knotted Italian tie, a slash of crimson against his crisp white shirt. "But documents like these, they simply don't inspire confidence." He watched a small, cruel smile playing on his lips as the sick black man before him bent down, slowly and deliberately, to retrieve his own identification from the floor. "Perhaps you'd be better off looking for a bank more suited to your profile." Roberto Silva remained crouched for a few long, silent seconds, his back to the room, shielding himself from the dozens of curious, judgmental stares. He held the laminated card in his work-worn hands, hands that had built empires from nothing, and he noted, with a kind of detached clinical interest, that they did not tremble. At 60, he had the posture of a man who had weathered storms far more violent, far more destructive, than the petty arrogance of a young, insecure executive. When he stood up, he moved with a slow, deliberate grace, his spine as straight and as unyielding as an old oak tree. His eyes met Anderson's, and in their depths, there was not the shame or anger that the manager had been expecting. There was only a quiet, profound, and deeply disturbing serenity. The scene had captured the attention of the entire lobby. An elegant woman in a Chanel suit whispered something to her husband, discreetly pointing in Roberto's direction. Young executives in identical gray suits stopped their conversation mid-sentence to watch the unfolding drama, their faces alight with a kind of morbid, schadenfreude-fueled curiosity. The silence in the room was so thick, so heavy, that the whisper-quiet hum of the state-of-the-art air-conditioning system seemed to amplify. A low, menacing drone. "I understand perfectly," Roberto replied, his voice a calm, resonant baritone that contrasted sharply with the explicit contempt he had just endured. "I just came to make a simple transaction, but I realize now that perhaps this is not the right time." Anderson Mitchell rolled his eyes and turned to his personal assistant, Paula, a young woman who had watched the entire scene with a look of obvious, growing discomfort. "It's always like this with these kinds of people," he muttered, his voice a stage whisper loud enough for half the lobby to hear. "They think they can just walk in here, without the proper credentials, without understanding how things work in the real world." Roberto Silva was not, by any outward measure, a man who belonged in this world. His clothes were simple, clean, but worn. His gray hair was neatly combed, but his hands, strong and calloused, told the stories of decades, of hard, physical dedication. But there was something in his gaze, a deep, quiet intelligence, a calmness that only exists in those who carry powerful, dangerous secrets, and who know with an absolute certainty exactly when and how to reveal them. What was most intriguing, most unsettling, about Roberto's reaction was his complete and utter lack of surprise. It was as if he had walked into the bank that morning expecting, and perhaps even hoping for, exactly this kind of treatment. It was as if this public, calculated humiliation was not an unforeseen obstacle, but a necessary, integral part of a much larger, much more complex plan. "May I ask what brought you to our bank today, sir?" Paula, the assistant, asked, her voice trembling slightly. She was trying to ease the tension, to perform a kind of professional damage control, but she also seemed to sense, on some intuitive level, that something was not right about this situation, that there were currents moving beneath the surface that she could not see. "I wanted to open a business account," Roberto replied simply, his gaze still locked on Anderson. "My daughter mentioned that you offer some very specialized services for large international corporations." Anderson let out a short, sharp, sarcastic laugh. "Large corporations, really?" He looked Roberto up and down again, his gaze a slow, insulting appraisal. "Listen, Mr. Silva, is it? Perhaps you don't understand the profile of our clientele. We are talking about multi-million-dollar contracts, international partnerships, complex investment vehicles that require a significant level of financial sophistication." What Anderson Mitchell didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that Roberto Silva had not arrived at Sterling Financial by chance. For the past 3 months he had been hearing the name of this bank, again and again. during his weekly family dinners with his daughter. "We're closing a huge partnership with Sterling Financial, Dad," she had said, her eyes shining with the fierce, brilliant excitement of a CEO on the verge of a historic deal. $5 billion. It's the biggest contract in our company's history. It's going to change everything. While Anderson continued his condescending, self-satisfied monologue about profile suitability and institutional standards, Roberto's eyes discreetly, methodically, scanned the bank's operations. He noted the way the well-dressed white clients were greeted with warm, deferential smiles and offered gourmet coffee while they waited. He noted the way the executives, in their expensive, tailored suits, were immediately escorted to private, wood-paneled offices. The difference in treatment was not subtle. It was glaring, it was systematic, and it was exactly what he had come here to see. "I understand your position," Roberto said gently, interrupting Anderson's lecture. "Indeed, large corporations do require partners who are up to the task." Something in Roberto's tone, a quiet, almost imperceptible note of authority, made Anderson pause for a moment. There was a certainty in that sentence that did not match the humiliation he had just so publicly inflicted. But the manager, blinded by his own arrogance and his own deep-seated prejudice, quickly dismissed it. As he reached the massive, revolving, glass door of the bank, Roberto did something that Anderson would never have expected. He did not walk out defeated. He did not walk out humiliated. He simply stopped, took out his cell phone, a simple, functional, and decidedly not a Powerline model, and typed a quick, simple message. "Camila, I need to talk to you about Sterling Financial. It's urgent." The reply came back in seconds. "Is there a problem, Dad? I'm just reviewing the final contracts with them now. The signing is scheduled for tomorrow." Roberto typed again, his fingers moving with a slow, deliberate precision. "Let's just say I had a rather interesting experience with their customer service." "Sure, Dad. Are you okay?" Roberto glanced one last time at Anderson, who was now serving a blonde, impeccably dressed woman with an almost obsequious reverence, his face a mask of fawning charm. A discreet, dangerous smile formed at the corner of Roberto's mouth. "Some people," he typed, "are about to discover that underestimating a person based on their ID card can cost them much more than they could ever possibly imagine." That as he walked out onto the sunny, bustling sidewalk, Roberto showed no signs of anger, no traces of sadness. There was only the quiet, profound, and deeply satisfying tranquility of a man who had just witnessed exactly what he had expected to witness. It was as if this calculated, ugly humiliation was not an insult, but a confirmation. The final piece of data he needed for a much larger, much more complex equation. Anderson Mitchell couldn't resist the temptation to turn his confrontation with Roberto into a piece of post-mortem entertainment for his colleagues. During lunch at the exclusive members-only executive restaurant on the 20th floor of the Sterling Financial Building, he recounted the story, for the third time, gesturing theatrically as he imitated what he perceived as the old man's humble, ignorant voice. "You should have seen the look on his face when I threw his ID on the floor." Anderson laughed, cutting into his perfectly grilled salmon. He tried to maintain his dignity. "You know, that pathetic, quiet pride they all have, but we all know how it is. These people, they think they can just walk into any place they want." Paula, his assistant, who had been forced to join him for lunch, stirred her salad uncomfortably. "Anderson," she said, her voice a low, hesitant whisper, "maybe he really did have a company. You didn't even check his background." "Paula, honey," Anderson interrupted, his tone a masterpiece of condescension. "I have been in this business for 8 years. I have a finely honed instinct for these things. I know a real client when I see one." "That man," he scoffed, "didn't even have a gold credit card." The other managers at the table laughed, a chorus of shared prejudice and unexamined privilege, but something in Anderson's overly loud, overly confident tone suggested that he was trying to convince himself as much as he was trying to convince the others. There had been something about the old man's calm, his serenity, his absolute lack of fear, that had bothered him more than he cared to admit. "Besides," Anderson continued, taking a long, slow sip of his expensive white wine, "I did him a favor. Imagine how embarrassing it would have been for him if he had actually tried to open an account and then found out he didn't even have the minimum deposit. I saved everyone a great deal of time and unpleasantness." What Anderson didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that at that very moment, in a gleaming, state-of-the-art conference room 30 blocks away, Roberto Silva was sitting at his daughter's kitchen table, leafing through the very contracts that would make the arrogant young manager swallow every single one of his contemptuous words. "Dad, you look worried." his daughter Camila observed, pouring him a cup of fresh, dark coffee into a mug that cost more than Anderson's monthly salary. What happened at Sterling Financial? Roberto sighed, choosing his words with a careful, deliberate precision. Let's just say, he began, that I had an enlightening, if not entirely surprising, experience regarding how they treat certain members of the public. What do you mean? The manager, Roberto said, an ambitious young man, named Anderson Mitchell, from what I saw on his name badge, was not exactly welcoming. In fact, he was quite explicit about the type of client he considered to be suitable for his bank. Camilla frowned. Anderson Mitchell. She knew that name. She had seen it on the internal reports, the organizational charts she had received during the final stages of the negotiation. He was a senior manager, a key figure who would be responsible for a significant part of the implementation of the partnership that was about to revolutionize both of their companies. Dad, she said, her voice now taking on a new, sharper edge, I want you to tell me exactly what happened. Roberto told her everything, from the moment he had walked into the bank, to the moment his ID card had been thrown, like a piece of garbage, onto the cold hard marble floor. As he spoke, he saw his daughter's expression gradually change. The initial concern was replaced by a quiet, cold fury, an expression he had not seen on her face since she was a young, brilliant, and fiercely determined law student. Camila was known in the corporate world for her calculating coldness, for her ability to dismantle her opponents with a quiet, surgical precision. But this was different. This was personal. He threw your ID on the floor, she repeated, her voice a dangerously quiet whisper, like it was trash. Daughter, Roberto confirmed, but don't worry, I have been through far worse. And he had. Roberto Silva had built his first company, a small construction firm, from the literal rubble of the discrimination he had suffered in the 1980s, at a time when no bank would finance his dream, when no investor would take a chance on a young, ambitious black man. He had sold everything he had, worked 20 hours a day, and built low-income houses with his own two hands, until he could finally afford to hire his first employees. At 60, he had sold that company for a fortune that few people in the world knew about. His money was now quietly, anonymously invested in a series of diversified funds, spread across 3 different countries, but his modest, unassuming appearance had never revealed the 8-digit fortune he had accumulated through decades of relentless, back-breaking work. You know, daughter, he said, a thoughtful expression on his face. It was actually very interesting to observe how that bank works, especially considering the massive partnership you are about to enter into with them. Camila nodded slowly, her dark eyes taking on that dangerous, intelligent gleam that Roberto had known since she was a child. $5 billion. Dad, she said, it's the biggest contract in the history of our company. She paused, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. I wonder how they would react if they knew that the inappropriate old man they so publicly humiliated today is the father, the strategic mentor, and the informal senior advisor of the CEO who is about to make them the most profitable and powerful bank in the entire region. While Anderson Mitchell was dining at an expensive restaurant that evening, celebrating another successful day of maintaining the standards of Sterling Financial, and posting a screed on LinkedIn about the importance of maintaining strict quality criteria in customer service, Roberto Silva was on a secure video call with his daughter's 3 senior partners, being introduced as the wisest, most experienced, and most trusted strategic mind in their entire organization. He had spent decades building empires from nothing. Taking down the career of a single, arrogant, and profoundly careless bank manager would be, he thought to himself with a quiet, satisfying sense of anticipation, almost recreational. For a moment, when he had bowed his head in the face of Anderson's insults that morning, everyone in that bank had thought they had broken his spirit. But those who know true strength, those who have forged it in the fires of real adversity, know that it often grows best in the silence, fueled by injustice, tempered by patience, and waiting, always waiting, for the perfect moment to manifest itself in ways that can turn humiliation into revenge, and arrogance into an eternal, and very public, regret. The game was afoot, and Anderson Mitchell had no idea that he was not the player, he was the pawn, and he was about to be sacrificed. For 3 days, Roberto and Camila Silva planned meticulously, surgically. The conference room at Coleman Industries, a space usually reserved for billion-dollar negotiations, was transformed into a war room. The table was covered not with contracts, but with a different kind of ammunition: financial reports, psychological profiles, and a complete in-depth analysis of Sterling Financial's corporate culture, its vulnerabilities, and its key players. Dad, are you absolutely sure you want to go through with this? Camila asked for the 10th time, reviewing the documents that were scattered across the table. Once we cancel the partnership, there's no turning back. It's $5 billion. That's almost half of our company's annual revenue. Robert, who was dressed not in his usual simple clothes but in his only Hugo Boss suit, a garment that had been hanging in his closet since the day he sold his first company, adjusted the cuffs of his shirt. Daughter, he said, his voice calm and steady, I have learned one very important thing in my 60 years of building companies. Money can always be recovered. Dignity, once it is lost, takes decades to regain. Sometimes, it can never be recovered at all. The team was assembled. Dr. Enrique Mora, the company's senior legal counsel, a man with a 15-year undefeated track record in corporate litigation, Marcus Thompson, their brilliant sharp-edged chief financial officer, and Roberto himself, the quiet, unassuming ghost who had suddenly revealed himself to be a grandmaster of strategy. Clause 17b of the partnership agreement allows for unilateral termination in the event of documented discriminatory practices by the financial institution, Dr. Mora explained, pointing to a line in the massive contract. But we will need concrete, irrefutable evidence. Leave that to me, Roberto said calmly, sliding a thick folder across the table. Inside was something that made even the experienced, world-weary lawyer gulp. It was a complete, in-depth dossier on Anderson Mitchell. It included printouts of his LinkedIn activity from the past 2 years, a collection of subtly prejudiced posts about quality standards and cultural fit. It included his comments on articles about corporate diversity, comments that revealed his deep-seated discriminatory mindset. It included his likes on questionable, racially charged content. My God, murmured Dr. Mora. How did you get all of this? When you are 60 years old, and have been building companies since you were 20, you learn that information is power, Roberto replied. And Anderson Mitchell is not just arrogant, he is careless. He has left a digital trail of his own prejudice a mile long while the Silver family planned their counterattack. Anderson Mitchell was enjoying what he believed to be another victorious week. He had posted on LinkedIn about another excellent quarter of growth for the bank, and had received dozens of fawning, complimentary comments from his colleagues. His latest achievement had been to reject 3 highly qualified businesses for corporate accounts. Some people just don't understand that we have to maintain high standards here. He had commented to Paula during their morning coffee break. It's a matter of preserving the bank's reputation. Paula had become increasingly, deeply uncomfortable with her boss's comments, especially after the incident with Roberto Anderson. She had said, her voice hesitant, have you ever thought that maybe we're being too selective? Paula, honey, he had replied, his tone a masterpiece of condescension. You're still new to this business. In time you will develop an instinct for recognizing who really belongs here and who doesn't. What Anderson didn't know was that at that very moment, Roberto Silva was being welcomed as a VIP guest at the headquarters of Coleman Industries. The receptionist greeted him as Mr. Silva, Senior Strategic Advisor. The employees stopped discreetly to greet him in the hallways. Dad, meet Marcus Thompson, our Chief Financial Officer, Camila had said, guiding Roberto into a meeting room with a panoramic view of the city. Mr. Silva, Marcus had said, extending his hand with the kind of deep, genuine respect that is reserved for major investors and industry legends. It is an honor to finally meet you. Camila speaks of your business acumen constantly. During the meeting that followed, Roberto had demonstrated exactly why he had built and sold companies for decades. His questions were precise. His analysis was surgical. His suggestions revealed a sharp, brilliant strategic mind. Marcus, Roberto had asked casually, what would be the financial impact on our company if, for some unforeseen reason, we had to cancel the partnership with Sterling? Financial, it would be significant, but not catastrophic, Marcus had replied, after consulting his reports. We have other banking options. In fact, Commonwealth National Bank has already expressed a strong interest in a similar partnership. They have even offered us more favorable terms. Camila and Roberto had exchanged a quick, knowing glance. Everything was falling into place. There's something else you should know, Roberto had said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. I've done some research on your potential new partner, Anderson Mitchell. This man is not just occasionally prejudiced. His bias is systematic. He had slid over the printouts of internal emails that had been leaked to him by a disgruntled former employee of Sterling Financial. messages in which Anderson referred to Latino clients as cultural risks and openly questioned the statistical reliability of black entrepreneurs. "This is unbelievable," Marcus had whispered, looking at the documents. "If this ever leaks to the public." "It won't leak," Roberto had interrupted, "because we are going to use it much more intelligently." Meanwhile, Anderson was having lunch at his favorite expensive restaurant, posting photos of his gourmet meal on Instagram with the hashtag executive life. He had no idea that every post, every comment, every single public display of his own arrogance was being carefully archived by Roberto's team. "Dad, are you absolutely sure you want to go through with this?" Camila had asked later that day, seeing the relentless, unwavering determination in the eyes of the man who had taught her that dignity is not, under any circumstances, negotiable. "Daughter," he had replied, "that man humiliated me because he thought I was insignificant. Tomorrow he will find out that some people are much, much more important than they appear to be." That night, while Anderson Mitchell slept peacefully in his penthouse apartment, dreaming of his next promotion, Roberto Silva remained awake, finalizing the last details of what would be the most spectacular, most public, and most satisfying downfall the Raleigh banking sector had ever witnessed. The gun was loaded, the target was in his sights, and Anderson Mitchell had no idea that he had chosen the wrong, quiet, unassuming old man to underestimate. For a moment, when he had thrown that ID card on the floor, Anderson had thought he was demonstrating his own power. But those who know true power, those who have earned it through decades of struggle and sacrifice, know that it does not need to be flaunted. It simply acts, at the right moment, devastatingly and irreversibly. The next morning, Roberto woke at 5 a.m. and put on his Hugo Boss suit again. Today, he was not just a father who had been humiliated, he was the man who was about to teach Anderson Mitchell, and the entire world, that underestimating people can cost $5 billion. At the headquarters of Coleman Industries, Camila and her legal team were reviewing the termination documents for the 10th time. "Camila, are you absolutely sure you want to do this?" Dr. Mora asked, his face grim. "Once these are signed, there is no turning back." "Dr. She," replied, her voice as calm and as clear as a bell. "My father taught me that dignity is priceless, and $5 billion will not buy back the respect that they denied him." Meanwhile, Anderson arrived at Sterling Financial, beaming. He had received a message from senior management, informing him of an urgent 10 o'clock meeting with their new strategic partners. In his arrogant mind, it could only mean one thing. His promotion had finally arrived. Paula, he ordered, adjusting the gold tie he reserved for what he considered to be important occasions. "Have my desk polished, and prepare the special coffee. Today is the day my career takes off." At 9:45, he was in his office, organizing the last details, when Paula appeared at the door, her face visibly pale. "Anderson," she stammered, there's a problem. The Silva family. They're here for the meeting." "Silva?" Anderson frowned. "I don't know any Silvas important enough for a strategic partnership meeting." It's the man from the other day," Paula whispered, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. "The one you know. He's with a woman." She introduced herself as the CEO of Coleman Industries. Anderson's blood instantly turned to ice. Coleman Industries, the $5 billion company. The deal that was supposed to make his career. The contract that was being finalized this very week. "Impossible," he muttered, but his hands were already shaking as he frantically searched for information on his computer. Roberto Silva. The search returned a result that made him almost faint. Roberto Silva, 60, retired businessman, father of Coleman Industries CEO Camila Silva, estimated net worth $120 million. No, Anderson repeated like a mantra as he hurried through the corridors towards the main meeting room. When he opened the door, the scene he found confirmed his worst nightmare. Roberto was sitting calmly at the head of the main table, wearing the same impeccable suit that contrasted so brutally with the simple, worn clothes he had been wearing the day before. At his side was an elegant, powerful, and unmistakably professional woman in her 40s. "Mr. Mitchell," Camila Silva said, her voice as cold as ice. "I believe you have already met my father, Roberto Silva." Anderson tried to force a smile, but his legs were shaking. "Mr. Silva, there was a misunderstanding yesterday. I didn't know that I was important," Roberto interrupted calmly. "Interesting. I was under the impression that Sterling Financial treated all of its clients with respect, regardless of their appearance." The regional director, Michael Thompson, arrived, running, clearly upset. "Miss Silva, Mr. Silva, I apologize for any inconvenience. Anderson, would you please step outside? Actually, Camila said, opening an elegant leather briefcase, we would like Mr. Mitchell to stay. After all, she paused, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. He was the one who helped us make a very important decision. Anderson felt sweat trickle down his back. What decision? Roberto smiled serenely. The decision, he said, to cancel our $5 billion partnership with Sterling Financial. The silence in the room was absolute, deafening. Michael Thompson looked as if he had just been punched in the stomach. Camila, we can work this out. Anderson will be disciplined, I promise you. Michael, Roberto spoke, his voice carrying the quiet, unshakable authority of a man who had built empires. When your company throws a client's identification on the floor like a piece of trash, you are not just disrespecting a person, you are revealing your entire corporate culture. Anderson, desperately trying to defend himself, stammered, Mr. Silva, I was protecting the bank from possible fraud. It's standard procedure. Standard procedure. Camila slid a series of printouts across the table. These are screenshots of your LinkedIn profile from the last 2 years. Mr. Mitchell, posts about maintaining proper standards, about filtering out inappropriate clientele. It seems your bias wasn't an isolated accident. It's a pattern. The evidence was devastating. Subtly racist comments, likes on discriminatory content, a complete, undeniable digital history of systematic prejudice. That was taken out of context. Anderson stammered, like it was taken out of context when you threw my father's ID on the floor. Camila's voice was dangerously, beautifully calm. Michael Thompson tried to salvage what he could. Miss Silva, we can fire Anderson immediately. The bank does not condone this behavior. It's too late, Michael, Roberto said, standing up, his presence suddenly dominating the room. Yesterday, when you humiliated me, I was just a customer. Today he looked at his daughter, his eyes shining with a fierce, profound pride. I am the father of the CEO you just lost. Anderson collapsed into his chair, the reality of the situation finally, brutally, hitting him. $5 billion, his career, his reputation, all of it, destroyed by a few seconds of his own arrogant, thoughtless cruelty. Please, he whispered. I didn't know. I can change. I can. Yesterday, you knew exactly who I was, Roberto replied, his voice filled with an unshakable dignity. A human being who deserved basic respect. That was all you ever needed to know. As father and daughter prepared to leave, Roberto paused at the door and turned to Anderson one last time. Do you know what the difference is between us, Anderson? He asked. You judged me by my appearance, I judged you by your character. And I found that of the two of us, only one had anything of real value to offer. The doors to the room closed, leaving Anderson alone with the wreckage of his career. Outside, the employees whispered in the hallways. The news of the cancellation of the largest partnership in the bank's history was already spreading like wildfire, and at that moment, Anderson Mitchell finally, truly, understood that some people carry a quiet, silent power, a power that only reveals itself when it is underestimated by those who confuse arrogance with intelligence, and that true strength does not need to announce itself. It simply acts, when necessary, in a way that is both devastating and irreversible. 2 weeks after the meeting that would change everything, Anderson Mitchell cleaned out his desk for the last time. His dismissal had been immediate, public, and without negotiation. 8 years of his career at Sterling Financial now boiled down to a single cardboard box and the contemptuous looks of his former colleagues in the hallways. Did you really think you could treat a client like that and get away with it? Paula, who had now been promoted to his former position, asked, her voice a mixture of pity and a kind of poetic justice. Roberto Silva was literally the father of the biggest potential client in the history of this bank. What made it worse? For Anderson was discovering that his humiliation had gone viral internally. The story was shared in company-wide WhatsApp groups, always ending with the same, simple, anathemous phrase, never judge a book by its cover, especially when that book might be worth $5 billion. Meanwhile, Roberto and Camila Silva had signed an even bigger partnership with Commonwealth National Bank. The deal was for $5.2 billion, $300 million more than the original offer from Sterling Financial. The director of Commonwealth, impressed by the Silva family's story of integrity and their commitment to ethical business practices, had offered them preferential terms. Mr. Silva, Marcus Chen, the president of Commonwealth National, said, "It is an honor to work with a family that so clearly values dignity above profit." That is a rare and precious commodity in the corporate world. Roberto had smiled serenely. Marcus, he had replied, I have learned that the only true partners are those who respect you at the first handshake, not after they have learned about your net worth. The news of the cancelled partnership spread through the financial sector like a wildfire, and Anderson Mitchell discovered, in the worst possible way, that his reputation had been destroyed, not just at Sterling Financial, but throughout the entire Raleigh market. 3 months later, he was still unemployed. Every interview ended the same way. Oh, you're the Anderson Mitchell who lost the $5 billion Coleman Industries contract. Thanks, but we'll pass. One day, while drinking a cheap coffee, alone in a cheap cafe, Anderson saw Roberto enter the establishment. The man who had so thoroughly, so elegantly, so completely destroyed him was wearing his simple, unassuming clothes again. But now, Anderson knew exactly who was standing before him. Roberto ordered his coffee, paid politely, and as he passed Anderson's table, he paused briefly. Good morning, Anderson, he said. How's the job search going? Anderson swallowed. Hard, Mr. Silver, he stammered. I would like to apologize. I didn't know. Anderson, Roberto interrupted him gently. You knew exactly what you needed to know. That I was a human being who deserved your basic respect. Everything else was, and is, completely irrelevant. But I can change. Anderson pleaded. I can learn. Roberto nodded. I sincerely hope that you can, he said. Because the next person you judge by their appearance may have a daughter even more powerful, and even less forgiving, than mine. With that, Roberto calmly walked out, leaving Anderson alone with the bitter, inescapable reality that some lessons, some of the most important lessons in life, come far too late to save a career that has been destroyed by one's own hands. Months later, Coleman Industries had grown by 40%, driven by its new, powerful partnership with Commonwealth National. Roberto, now officially hired as a senior strategic consultant for his daughter's company, used his office and his considerable influence to mentor young minority-owned entrepreneurs who were facing the same kind of discrimination he had faced decades ago. Dad, Camila said one afternoon, watching Roberto in a meeting with a young black entrepreneur who had been rejected by 3 different banks. You have turned your own humiliation into a source of growth and opportunity for hundreds of people. Daughter, he had replied, I have discovered that the best revenge isn't destroying those who have hurt you. It is building something so great, so important, so good, that they realize just how small they truly were. Sterling Financial never fully recovered from the loss. The story of Anderson Mitchell and the $5 billion contract became a case study in business schools across the country, a cautionary tale about how prejudice, arrogance, and a profound lack of basic human decency can cost billions a year. Later, Roberto was invited to be the keynote speaker at the National Banking Convention to speak on the importance of universal respect in customer service. As he took the stage, he spotted Anderson in the audience. He was now working as an insurance salesman, a shadow of the arrogant, powerful executive he had once been. Ladies and gentlemen, Roberto began his speech, his voice ringing with a quiet, hard-won authority. Today, I am going to tell you a story about how 5 seconds of disrespect cost a financial institution $5 billion. Anderson hung his head, knowing that his story would be told, once again, but this time, as an example of what never, ever to do. Roberto ended his speech with a reflection that echoed throughout the convention hall. The difference between dignified treatment and discrimination, he said, is not in the wealth of the person who is standing in front of you. It is in the character of the person who is serving them. As he stepped off the stage to a thunderous, standing ovation, Roberto realized that he had turned his own personal humiliation into a lesson that would change the way thousands of professionals would treat their customers from that day forward. That ID card, thrown on the cold marble floor, had not broken his dignity. It had only revealed the moral fragility of those who believe that power is measured by the ability to humiliate others. Anderson had tried to destroy Roberto, but he had only succeeded in destroying himself. And Roberto had learned that true revenge is not about repaying the damage that has been suffered. It is about achieving a level of success, of influence, of goodness, that his enemies could never, in their wildest dreams, have imagined.